Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good morning and welcome. On behalf of the family, we are grateful that you are here. You will note that some of us have lots of color on. Some of us are wearing beloved clothes that David may have said, that's my favorite that you wear. So please do not think I'm being disrespectful, but David loved Christmas. And so many of us are doing what he asked, be filled with joy. I begin reading of the obituary. David was born July 2nd, 1974. He is survived by his wife, and I'm going to go to the phonetic spelling. I'm sorry, I just panic here. How many times have I asked you to pronounce your name for me, right? Chinyere, not Sheen, but Chinyere. He is survived by his beautiful wife, his children, Alexander and Penelope, and their mother, Jenny. He is also survived by his parents, Richard and Lucy, his brother, Daniel, a niece, Coy, his father-in-law, his brothers-in-law, and a sister-in-law. And forgive me, but please later today ask them to pronounce their names. David's legacy is also lived on by the many, many friends and extended family members in the United States and abroad. He was preceded in death by his parents and by his paternal grandparents, Milton and Lorayne, his maternal grandmother, and his mother-in-law. David loved reading, and he loved filling his brain with knowledge. Alexander, or Xander as many of you know, as many of you call him, says his dad was one of the smartest and most philosophical persons he will ever know. David remained a kid at heart, and he cherished every precious moment spent with his family and his children. David believed in the importance of putting something good out into the world, and his work ethic and dedication to his work was evident to all who knew him, even up to the last moments of his life. Everyone, including those of us who knew him at the Woodbury Healthcare Center, saw him as a light of beauty and goodness in the world. I'm going to read to you some memories and thoughts that Chinyere put together. You're laughing at me. Put together, and as well as Xander and Penelope, Penny, and Jenny put together. And so these are titled. This is titled David's Journey. We begin with Chinyere. Please, every time I mispronounce, please correct me, because David corrected me frequently. Because he loved his wife. Oh my goodness. We were so impressed with this man's ability to love, and how much he loved his children, how much he loved his wife, and how hard he and the children's mother, Jenny, worked along with David's wife to bring this beautiful joy into their world. And you've touched our hearts. And I've told you many times how I will never forget my time with you. David was my love, she writes, my support, my companion, and my partner in crime. And as he often said, he was my best friend. He was my buddy when we went out to do everything and anything. On weekends, when the kids were with their mom, we went on adventures. And those of you who knew David would know that even a simple trip to the grocery store would be an adventure. Together, she writes, we played video games, watched movies, read books, and went for walks. Listening to music and watching music videos will always be treasured memories. We belong to the same generation, and consequently, we knew many of the same songs and loved them. We laughed to Sir Mix-a-Lot, and David frequently teased me and inserted my name, and the name would be Chinyere. Can you imagine putting that to the beat of music? And he did it. He often sang. He directly, he would sing to his son or daughter or his love, and using the words of a song to express his deep and abiding love for them. She writes, I miss my husband. We miss our friend and our father, the children wrote. This entire year, his beloved wife supported him not 100%, but 1,000%. She frequently stopped him from falling downstairs when he would faint due to orthostatic hypotension, or when he stumbled from neuropathy. But as that disease took over his life, they made sure that it didn't take over all of them and that he was able to live with joy. She frequently called 911 because he was unresponsive due to low blood sugars. She made, now get a load of this, she would make not one, but 5, 6, or 7 different attempts at breakfast or lunch or supper to entice him to eat. So can you imagine, this is the 7th time you've made the breakfast effort, 100,000% devoted to each other. In the last year of his life, they frequently spoke of joy. And he was encouraged to do whatever sparked his joy. He was a techie at heart. That's not my quote. He told me that, but his family told me that as well. He'd been a Windows man for years. How many of you love Windows, right? He's a Windows man, devoted to Windows. But he wanted to try something new in his last years. So he decided he would try an Apple product. So his wife encouraged him to try, what was it, an Apple iPod? Because that's the simplest thing, right? But that wasn't good enough. So he bought an iPhone, a computer, an iPod, and an Apple Watch, and fully invested himself into it. And she rejoiced as she watched him learn this experience and this expensive venture. And she said, and I quote, "It was worth every penny to see him happy in the midst of so much difficulty and pain." She accompanied him to the myriad doctor appointments, sat with him through hours and hours of chemo infusions, wrote down everything that the doctors and the staff would say so that they could thoughtfully ask questions and make sure they understood the instructions and made sure that they could do everything possible to support him. She was indeed his cheerleader. And when the doctor said that dreaded word, hospice, they shared their grief with one another. He could no longer walk. He could barely move at that point. The cancer and the treatments had so ravaged his body, but his mind and his spirit were sharper than ever. He was hungry for more knowledge, and that's how I got to know him. He wanted to think deep thoughts, and as Xander said, he was philosophical. He wanted to explore his spirituality, and he wanted to experience love and joy as long as he could live. When he was moved into hospice at the Woodbury Healthcare Center, where I serve as a chaplain, she and the family looked around, and the room was pretty sterile, and they're boring. And so they thought, how would he feel when his visitors and his loved ones came to visit him? Penny and his son and his friend Jenny helped Chinyere. Chinyere helped him make his room. Thank you. She actually told me earlier to phonetically spell it, and I didn't. I put a C in there instead of an S. That would help. So they decorated his room. They filled it with artwork from Penny, and they put rotating. They had I don't know what product it was, but a rotating one of those rotating photo things, where it just rotates and shows photos. They put all of his favorite photos on there. They filled his room with books. He loved his books. And his friend, decorated his room with a Christmas tree. And they put Christmas lights all over the room. No, Xander, you're the one who brought the Christmas tree, right? And his friend decorated the room. So it became a room that not only the family and friends wanted to go into, but staff started sneaking into, to just be surrounded with the beauty in his room, but also the beauty in this man's heart. He was very loved. The staff at Woodbury Healthcare Center, as I said, popped in just to feel the serenity that emanated from him. Now, David's mission was to remind people to live fully, with joy and peace and knowledge that love means something. And those are direct quotes from him. His beloved Chinyere wasn't allowed to stay overnight with him. COVID changed so many things for families. And so instead she would come as early as she could, and she would spend all day with him. And they would share morning coffee together, and they would hold hands late into the evening as he fell asleep. It was one of his greatest pleasures. Now, I asked one day about his coffee cups, because they were always from Starbucks. Do I dare say that? Yeah. So I asked, can I bring you some coffee one day? And he goes, no. I only want to drink the coffee that my wife brings me. It is my special time with her. At night, she would make sure that he had everything that he needed close at hand, so that he was happy, and so that he could be positive, and that she could make sure that as she headed home, he was as comfortable as he could be. Through all the family's efforts, they just simply focused on him. They tried hard, even though were so focused on him, they tried hard not to neglect their own self-care, because they wanted to be able to come to him every day with beautiful, full hearts that were beacons of light to them. He enjoyed a last outing at the zoo, and he was so pleased with it. He loved being with the kids and seeing the animals. And I am told that Xander and Penny took him and zoomed him up and down, not just a little bit, but maybe threatened to let him go down the hills in the wheelchairs a little bit, give him some exhilaration. And this is what he told his beautiful wife. If this is my last day, I'd be happy and satisfied. That was a tremendous family outing. He had not one, but two Thanksgiving dinners. It was his favorite holiday, and he was so pleased with them. And he told his beautiful wife that every single day he was grateful that she was with him, that she was patient, and he was so proud to call her his wife. And he told everyone that he met at the healthcare center how much he loved his family. We all knew it because he never let someone leave without telling them how much he loved his family. He said that he had the most beautiful children in the world. He said that loving his wife and his children and the special people in his life were the most important tasks that he had ever done. As the family was at his side, especially his wife, during nearly every waking hour that he had, he insisted on buying her a comfortable chair. The chairs that we provided were folding chairs, so they weren't very comfortable. So he bought her a rocking recliner chair. Is that what it was? It was white, it was cream colored, beautiful. He did not want her to be uncomfortable. And he was so happy. He told her that when I look at you sitting in that chair, I am filled with joy. Now, when someone knows someone so well, and this is the saddest thing about what COVID has done, is not only do we have to wear masks over our face, and we understand why we have to do that, especially in healthcare settings. But family doesn't get to be with their loved ones as often or as long or as much as they wish. And so staff, we really realize how much we rely on families to tell us, wait a minute, my husband needs some extra medical attention right now. And you were able to provide that. When you before anyone else, were able to notice when his blood sugars dropped, when everything happened. So when you think, this is my little word of encouragement, when you think that your visits don't matter, I want to tell you they do. The time that you give to your loved ones, to your friends, to your family, when they are in a healthcare setting, is beyond measure what you provide to them. And what you provided to your dear and beloved David is without words beautiful and treasured. David texted his wife these beautiful words, "Thank you for being you. I thought I was dreaming when I woke and I sensed your presence, but there you were. I am so happy." Smiley face. And she was happy too, knowing that she was a constant and comfort support to him. She writes, "I miss David immensely. It does not seem fair that when we finally found each other, our time was cut so short. It also seems hugely unfair that he should be gone, cut down in the prime of his life. He recorded a video shortly before he passed away, in which he was able to tell her, 'You are my world. I love you. And all I want is for you to be happy and to be successful.'" She writes, "It's hard facing life without my husband, my friend, my love. But I will do my best to fulfill his dying wish, just as I did my best to fulfill his wishes this last year. I miss you, my friend." When she got the news early in the morning, probably about 6, 5 o'clock in the morning. She was still sleeping when the phone rang and woke her up. She had been planning to meet with the team at the healthcare center that morning to discuss how better to manage his symptoms. I thought that perhaps they were getting tired of listening to me, she said. But this again is where families are so important. You remind us that your family, your loved one, is everything to you and that you matter. So as she sat at his bedside, she noticed that a tear was still dripping from his eye. And she gently took that tear on her finger so that she could keep it as a memory with her always. And she herself was crying, and she said, I gently took one of my tears and placed it in her hand, or in his hand, so that together they were sharing their tears even in death. Toward the end of his life, he was very concerned about finding each other in the next life. Will I know who you are? Will I see you? Will I meet you again? Will you be there with me? And they searched for ways, and that was a lot of his, our discussions together. And on the day that he died, some beautiful things happened that maybe are not so beautiful to everyone else, but certainly to the family. Now, most of the time, David had to listen to some loud shouting from across the hallway. And on the day that he died, the sounds quieted. And the family was deeply appreciated that the resident played music instead. And the first song that that person played was Unchained Melody. And it brought about memories of the movie Ghost and the mental image of Patrick Swayze as the ghost trying with all his might to connect with his love as they wept together and moved on and grieved. And once the song was over, she felt much lighter, as if the tears had been washed away for a little while, and only her love and peace and remembrance was in the room with him. The next song was a happier one. She thinks that it was My Girl. And again, it brought about a joy with her. And then she heard in the hallway some voices singing. And those were the voices of her beautiful stepdaughter, Penny, and his friend Jenny, the children's mother, singing Over the Rainbow. And those voices brought such comfort to that room. It was a song that he frequently had the music therapist sing with him over the days. We are all just walking each other home. It's a quote that David and his beautiful wife shared together. And she writes, I walk my husband home today. To be a constant and comforting, calming, and joyful presence from my husband on this journey is important. I look forward to seeing him again one sweet day. These were the words from his family, and I was asked to read them together. At this time, we're going to move to much more personal voices from his friends and family and loved ones. So I believe, Dan, we're asking you to come forward. Now there's a microphone, 2 microphones here. So don't wander from the lectern, I guess,
Okay.
because they are live streaming it.
me, I'm Dan, I'm Dave's brother. I'm a couple years younger than Dave, and obviously loved him very much. I want to thank everybody for coming. Over the last 2 months or so, I've realized that there's about 3-4 years of Dave's life that not many of us really knew about, the majority of us anyways, but I had the pleasure of getting to know a lot of his friends who I've heard of. Went to dinner last night, picked up a lot of really cool stories, and you'll hear from them later, but I think you'll be surprised about a lot of the things that Dave did do, not surprised about a lot of the common things that everybody knows about him. The 3 things that I picked out about Dave was that he's brilliant, very caring guy, and turns out the other crew didn't know he was very creative, but he really was. I'm kind of run down the list of as we were younger, because most of you don't know a lot about that, but Mom and Dad did a lot for my brother and I, and still do. And Dad traveled a lot, which meant Mom watched Dave and I quite a bit, and Dave would take a lot of time in reading and learning, and I think a lot of the reason why he's so brilliant is because of how smart both my parents are. You know, my mom obviously had to come over from Korea, and I can't imagine how tough that was for her, but Dave did a really good job of taking care of both my mom and I. Sorry. He would go to school, he'd learn, he'd come home, teach me, teach my mom, and he did that his entire life. And found out last night, I taught him a couple things, turns out, that amazing guy, amazing father. He in addition to loving Chinyere as much as he did, Xander and Penny were his world. Every time I talked to him, that's what he wanted to talk about. All the accomplishments they had, all the things they were doing, how proud he made them, or they made him. Jenny, of course, remains in his life. Amazing relationship they had. She was very pivotal in helping set a lot of this up. I thank her and appreciate her so much. I'm trying to move on to something a little more positive, but I wanted to thank you all for coming. I did one thing that I'm very proud of, and when David got checked into hospice, I kind of got the feeling from him that he was done, you know, and he had said and done everything to all of us. I mean, the extra month we got was a blessing, and I put a post on Facebook that got shared to a lot of people that just kind of requested that people that he affected contact him and just let him know. And he was overwhelmed with that. There was over 100 people that he hadn't heard from. So it was Orpheus, a couple other guys that, you know, high school guys that he probably hasn't seen for 30 years. And it touches me. And every time I saw him, he couldn't have been more appreciative. He slept a lot during those times, but he told me he's going to reply to every one of them. And he did. And I think that was a big part, a big reason why we got it for our next month. So thank you for that. Had a lot of memories of Dave, and in talking to many of you, I remembered a lot more, all the way from when I was a kid. Dad and Mom had us in Slayton, and we ended up moving to Indiana for a couple of years, and we came back and lived in Avoca for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, year and a half, and then we ended up in Slayton at the house that, you know, Dave and I ultimately grew up in. And during those years, there was quite a few memories, and we fought a lot. We loved each other. We we got into some arguments now and then. I didn't win very many fact-based arguments. But I could overpower him and many others. I was more the entrepreneur. He was very content all the time with everything, whatever it was. And I wanted to make a few bucks and do some things. I've always been a little more motivated than Dave when it came to career stuff. And the first opportunity was to get a paper out, and I was old enough, so I had to talk Dave into that. Turns out it was one of the best negotiations that he's ever done. From some stories last night, where basically he didn't want to, so I had to give him a lot of the money just so that I could do all the work. The last time that ever happened. But Dave did do that with me begrudgingly. We had paper routes, and Dad helped us a lot, and it was our first introduction to working, and memories that I'll never forget. I know kids can't do that now anymore, apparently, because of whatever. But I can't say we had a lot of fun doing it, but we did do it, and there was some fun moments. During elementary school times, it was always fun in general. As I grew up, it wasn't fun. It was not fun at all. When I would get older, and David was a particularly good student, particularly good not only intelligent-wise, but I think he was probably pretty accepted by the teachers. And as we got older, here comes Dan 2 years later, and Dan is not David from a educational point of view. I'm not as smart. I'm an absolute smart aleck. I know there was teachers that didn't like me at all, and there's probably only a couple that didn't care for Dave, and that's because he was smarter than they were. But I could see the disappointment in their eyes the first couple of times that they had to talk to me and I wasn't David. But it's a testament to how great David was, not how terrible I was, to be clear on that. As we got older, there's some memories that popped in, and again, I was so happy. I was here yesterday and meeting with a bunch of our family, and we told some stories, and the boys last night, and aunts and uncles and my grandma, and we were pretty consistently at Grandma's house, if not every week, every other week, and we were blessed that Aunt Linda and Marlene lived nearby, and we would share many experiences over various holidays. I remember a lot of times I didn't really want to go because I was of that age where I'd rather hang out with my friends and do whatever, but when we got there, it was always amazing, and we'd play games, and we would do various different crosswords with Grandma, and David always loved that, and I think that was a big part of him as well. Anytime he had the opportunity to learn something, he would, and anytime that you knew something he didn't know, that didn't last long either, because then he would go figure that out. And one example of that is Trivial Pursuit came out, was widely anyway, I don't know when it actually was made, but late 80s, early 90s, and I think it was Aunt Linda maybe that had it, but we started playing it, and while David was highly intelligent, there was a lot of things he did not know, and he was competitive, but to the point of he didn't want to win, he wanted to annihilate you. Winning was not a question. It was going to happen. It was a matter of how badly it was going to be. And I remember, I'm fortunate that almost everybody in our family is very intelligent, in my opinion. I might be an idiot, in which case we're all idiots. But in my opinion, we're a pretty smart bunch. And Trivial Pursuit was a lot of fun, except for me, because one was younger and I don't know trivial things. And David would lose for a little while. And if a question was asked and he didn't know, he would write it down. He'd go home. He'd figure it out. And then he also cheated, which is, he cheated a lot. So I figured it out because we played one time and he knew every question, it didn't matter what it was. So he memorized every card. He read every single question, he memorized it, it didn't matter what the category was. He might not know anything about it, but he knew the answer. So I figured it out, and we had a version of the game at home, and the game between Dave and I was that I had to get the sports one before he got all the other ones. All of them. And I would win on occasion, 1 out of 10. And he didn't appreciate that. So, and I made him play with a set that he didn't memorize, which is key. So what he decided to do to thwart my eventual wins, occasional wins, was that he would memorize the sports almanac. And I know that sounds crazy to you, but I'll give you an example. So, previously stated he didn't like to just win. He liked to very much win. And he wanted you to know that he was going to very much win. So he made it a point to go to the sports pie piece, which he wasn't even supposed to get, and he would land on it, and he'd ask a question. An example I gave last night. Who is the leader in hits in Major League Baseball? And the answer is Pete Rose, or at the time it was. And David wouldn't just say Pete Rose. He'd say, Pete Rose, 2,527 hits, had 186 triples and X whatever, and it just went on, and I'm like, yep, that's right. And in second place was Mike Schmidt, and his batting average was this, and amazingly enough, he was married 3 times, and because of it didn't matter, he memorized the damn book. Unless it was bowling or badminton or, a question like that, I was done. And again, it was a matter of him making sure that I knew that he was smarter than he was. He didn't do it randomly to people. He did it to people he knew or people that he thought were pretending to be smarter than what they really were. It was a game, and he was good at it. As we got older, Dave and I spent a ton of time together, but we were very, very different people. He was extremely introverted. I was very extroverted. I did sports. He did sports managing. And one other story that I have is regarding Dave dealing with being a manager for the basketball team and as a statistician. And there's one particular instance where we had played, and I don't remember the team, because by then I played basketball in 7th and 8th grade, not with the big boys, but there was another statistician that would keep stats that he didn't really care for, and I'm just going to say FOLDA because we hate them, but sorry, we dislike them. And for those of you who don't know how statisticians work for basketball, you keep track of the points and the fouls, and sometimes you keep track of where they shot the ball and whether they made it or not, steals, blocks, the whole deal, right? Some teams didn't have as good of statisticians as others. In this case, Dave didn't like the other statistician. I don't know why. So what Dave did is he sat next to this person and watched the entire first half of the game. Just watched it, didn't write down anything. And the other statistician was like, what is going on? What are you doing? And at halftime, what David did is he filled out his entire book on everything, every stat that you keep track of. But not only that, he filled out the other guy's book and pointed out to him all the things that he had wrong. And again, a very good example of something that David would do. He was amazing with numbers, amazing with everything. If there was something he didn't know, he would go out and figure it out. And almost to the point, not almost, it was absolutely annoying. But we all loved him for it, and it'll be most of our memories about how intelligent he was, but also how caring he was. I mentioned creative. He was an amazing artist. Penny is taken after him there. She's absolutely terrific at it. If you didn't get the opportunity to know Dave, mostly by you probably trying to get to know Dave, you wouldn't get to. And I see so many of his attributes in Penny and Xander, and it's fun for me to see them now. I hate kids, which included, well, I didn't hate my niece and nephew, but I don't do well with kids. Most of you know me, it's like I never held them as babies. I won't hold any of your babies. I won't come near them. Andy and Andy, they all know it's not my thing. They scare me. But as they've gotten older, I can see all of the great things about your dad in you. And my conversations with him towards the end had a lot to do with how much he loved my mom. I think my mom and Dave had a very special relationship, and he cared about her tremendously. obviously love my dad too, but we're very stoic. We don't really say how much we love each other, but I think it's implied, and I love you, Dad. And I know Dave loved my dad and mom a lot, and Dave was worried about my mom, as we all are, because he knows how much she loves him, but he also told me that he knew she'd be okay, and I know that's the case. Talk about Chinyere and Jenny a little bit too. I had the pleasure of watching Dave grow up and be in the wedding with Jenny and him, and that was a special relationship too. And while it wasn't the love of his life, which is absolutely Chinyere, she's an amazing person. She was great for Dave. I know as the family we've always appreciated her. Amazing mom. And Dave it would have been so much harder for Dave to be able to let go if he didn't know how great you were. And he told me so many times how he wasn't worried about the kids because of you and how great you are as a person and as a mother. And knowing Chinyere will be there as well and the kids love you too. Dave, it was a relief for Dave not to have to worry about that. Dave told me many times on how he's lived a great life and he's ready to go. And not in the sense of he wanted to go, but he was ready to go. And I think, again, we got to experience that a few different times with him as things would go up and down. And I'm sure most of you have had someone important to you go through some type of cancer. And it's hard on the family. And Dave didn't want that, right? He knew it was hard on the family, so he did everything he could to make sure that we weren't as worried about him. And you see all the pictures. Larry pointed it out, and I didn't even think about it, Larry Henderson, but he's smiling in damn near every one of them. And that's how he was. He's very pig-headed, like me sometimes, but he was a positive person always. And at the end, he was the most positive I've ever seen him. I mean, it was not good, but he was extremely positive through all of it. I think as David and I had discussions about success and legacy and how you'd be remembered, he and I agreed that there's things that you can own and things that you can have, but it's the people that you've touched and the family that you have and how much they love you and how much you love them. And just judging from those in the room, and I know some of you didn't really know Dave. My good friend Nick Bissick is here. He met him 2 times. Other than Chinyere, I think he was in staff. He's the last person to see him because he loved me, and therefore Nick loved him. And there was a lot of you guys like that. Dave received a lot of messages from people he'd never heard of that were just friends of mine or friends of friends, and again, that was amazing. And so for me, I judge David's life as a very successful one. The kids are amazing. The kids are smart. The kids are going to be absolutely amazing adults. Chinyere, I love you. You guys, and those of you that know Chinyere know she's very shy and very reserved, but also extremely smart. It's one of those things why David loves her. And I had the pleasure to meet some of your family, and I can see that. I know how much you loved him and how much he loved you, and how much you will always be part of our family, and we love you very much. So I've spoke way too much and way too long, but I wanted to again thank all of you for coming, and I appreciate it. Some of you traveled pretty far, but I'll hand it off to the next crew.
Jenny and Penny, and I'm not sure if Xander's coming forward. A couple of memories that I just wanted to share. One was visiting with Jenny and Penny and Xander and Chinyere. A comment that they had made was the crowning glory of their lives were the children, the relationship that you've been able to develop with your children, all of you. Powerful, powerful memory. This is the microphone, and I think, think this one, right?
Thank you. All right. All right, I am going to try to be brief here, and anyone who knows me knows I am not brief. But I want to introduce why Penny and I and Chinyere chose these two specific things. First of all, Dave in his final days was completely enraptured with synchronicities. And I don't know if any of you have had a moment where you've had a coincidence that was just too big to be a coincidence. But Dave lived in that space, and there were so many little moments. For instance, when the hospital told us that he was going to be admitted to hospice and that it was going to be weeks, and they gave us a book, and we read this message, and it gave us hope, didn't it? And when we sang this song outside of his door, and we had no idea that day after day he had requested this from the music therapist. And these are those moments of coincidence that carried us through these last few months, this last year. And as Dan said so well, his hope in the last year, while maddening sometimes, was insane. I've never seen someone tackle something so positively, believe in the impossible, and keep fighting. And as he would say, I wasn't fighting, the doctors were fighting, but he was fighting. Every time he chose to believe in something, sometimes when we didn't, he was fighting. And he made it another week, he made it another day, and we got to enjoy that time. So thank you so much for being here. I'll try not to cry. Ooh. Do you want to read first, or do you want me to sing first? You want to read first? Okay. Come on over.
We are standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads his white sails. I can't do this. It's okay.
You're doing great, Penny.
We take all the time in the world, darling.
You okay, honey? You be okay.
Look, almost
Are
here.
you okay?
Come to it together. I am standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the morning breeze, starts for the blue ocean.
She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her
Till at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. And someone at my side says, there, she's gone. Gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side. She's just as able to bear the load of living freight to her destined port.
His diminished size is in me, not in her.
And just at the moment when somebody at my side says, there,
he is gone. There are other eyes watching her coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout.
here she comes. And God is dying.
Good.
Good job.
You did real good,
I'm old school, what can I say? Ugh. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once. then why can't I? Why, oh, why can't I? Goodbye.
On the morning that David died, his mother came to the beds and she sang 2 songs in Korean. I don't remember what the first one was, but the second one was a Christmas carol.
Oh, I like it, he said.
Mhm.
So,
It was beautiful and it was haunting. And I can see why he loved music so much. Mhm. It was
and
beautiful.
another time, he was in high school. I never see he said choir, really choir song sang, but I don't understand what kind of sing. He bellow.
Mhm.
I never see you like you sing. I hear you sing. He said, sometimes I like the choir sing. I don't know, choir something.
Chorals and choirs. David sang in the choir. He was a choral singer.
He just loved him, but he's still singing.
Yeah.
So I said, good, I like to sometimes sing too. I tell him, good.
Yeah.
I tell him, he sings. He always
Thank you.
smile.
He always had a smile for your songs. Beautiful. We're going to hear from his college buddies.
So I'm the square out of the group, so they wanted me to go first. They have much better stories. Richard, Lucy, Dan, Chinyere, Jenny, Xander, and Penny. I think I speak for everyone here in saying that words are just inefficient in expressing how we feel about losing Dave. Grief is what is owed for love that is given to us. While we all grieve with you, we also wish to express and share an enduring love for Dave. Death ends a life, but not a relationship. And that's why we're here today, to celebrate an amazing life, an incredible friend, and probably the most humble, larger-than-life man I've ever met. I know it sounds hyperbolic to hear this, but Dave was truly just one of the most amazing people. I think everyone probably that's met him can attest to this. One of the most amazing people that you could ever come across. He was just packaged differently. What I'm finding out about now is how Dave compartmentalized his life with his friends. It's so wonderful to hear stories that Dan shared, and I was hearing from other members of his family about Dave, and we got to see Dave more as this rambunctious, wild guy. And we got an inkling into what Dave was like as a family man, as a father, but we're hoping to be able to share a side of Dave as his friends from over 20 some odd years. I first met Dave in 1996. I'd moved to Minnesota from LA. I finished my undergrad at the U of M, and the only person that I knew here in Minnesota was Jorma. Jorma had convinced me to apply to go to school here and had arranged housing for me. And what he didn't mention is that he had arranged housing for me with a band of hoodlums that was more apt for a reality show as opposed to a bunch of college roommates. For those of you that watch TV, there's a commercial there's a company called Benetton, and they do clothing, and a lot of their advertising is really, really pretty people, a very diverse group. Think of that picture, but then apply a more obnoxious, inappropriate, loud, perverse version of that picture, and that was the roommates. It was like Bad Santa, but on the college level. My first month here in Minnesota, Dave and Jorma and Jeff took me to Mall of America, because that's what you do when somebody just moves here from California, to take me to Camp Snoopy, that was called at the time, and we proceeded to get kicked out after our first ride. And that really helped lay the groundwork and give me an idea of what my next 2 decades with Dave would be like. It was always one experience, one amazing story, something that you just can't script that would just happen. As I think back on our early days of our friendship, I'm reminded of this quirky biracial kid from Slayton that had this genius traits. Dave invented his own language. That's one of the first things he shared with me when I met him. He was a quadruple major, I think, in college. He had this unbelievable photographic memory. In fact, even when he was in hospice, I had shared a picture of him when we went to see the Lakers when they were playing the Timberwolves like a decade ago, and I was on a first date with somebody that sat next to Dave, and he remembered her name, and I didn't. And this is in the midst of what Dave was going through. Dave would still remember locker names, locker codes, credit card numbers. That always worried me, because Dave remembered my credit card. God, that account was closed. But that's, to your point, Dan, that he would just memorize things. It was an unbelievable gift that the guy had. It was scary, but unbelievable. He had this genuine love for people, and really doing social things to build camaraderie was always his go-to. No matter what he was doing, whatever he was working on, the minute we would suggest we wanted to do something social, he was always all about it. It didn't matter if it was coffee, dinners, intellectual discussions. Those were his favorite, and then video games, because then he would annihilate everyone that he played with, because he could figure out ways to game the system and in process make us feel like we didn't know what we were doing. There was always 2 things that you can count on whenever we did anything social with Dave. One of us would always be really late, and Dave would always be on time. And we'd always lecture us for being late.
You were the one who was
Well, okay, I was trying to be inclusive. No fingers here. I lived with Dave in college, and then afterwards I lived with him for a year in St. Paul. And we spoke at lengths about politics, faith, relationships, basically my inability to have one and how much he was looking forward to one. We talked about cars and sports. And what really stood out about Dave was his authenticity. As no matter where you stood on something, you always knew that Dave was going to tell you something, whether you were prepared to hear it or you weren't prepared to hear it. And that's one of the most incredible things that I loved about him. This really shy guy, that once you got to scratch beyond that surface, you met this powerful, incredible, loving, brilliant giant. That out-of-this-world brilliance, as Dan mentioned, he would always, on our exchanges, every time we would see him, we'd say, oh yeah, I read this book, and we basically read a book a day. And he would love to tell us about it. There was one time there was this book I was reading about something about the Middle East peace, and I'd given it to Dave, and he read it that day, and then he read another book by the author, and then another book by the author, and then a couple of weeks later when I saw him, he had told me about 5 books that he had read, and he's like, how are you doing with the book? I was like, I think I'm still on the same chapter I was when I gave you the book. When I gave you that book. It's funny, before there was Google, there was Dave. We got to the point in our group that we wouldn't even search anything. We would just text Dave, hey, what do you think of this? And he would always send us back a link to Google and tell us to use it. Dave was incredibly competitive, to Dan's point. And he was so gifted that he would always figure out a way to beat us at something. And he also had a very healthy dose of Minnesota passive aggressiveness. And you never really knew you upset Dave, because he wouldn't tell you you upset him, but you found out later on. When we were in college, there was this healthy rivalry between Dave and a brother of ours, Ray. And the only way we knew that Dave was upset is at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, Dave would blast gangster rap to where the house was shaking, the walls were shaking, because he knew that would wake up Ray. As we became older, and everyone in our group kind of signed up to do the adult thing and got married and had kids, our rambunctious energy got channeled into texting. And we basically turned all these amazing stories and experiences into a digital platform to try to relive those times and try to relive and experience more. And oftentimes our exchanges with Dave really was just more about trying to poke the bear, because we knew how much he loved to theorize and intellectualize about something, or he loved to debate something. And so we would just put the little bait out there for him and let him go. And I think Dave enjoyed lecturing us as much as we enjoyed being lectured by Dave. I don't think I'm ever going to do justice to Dave, how Dave has become such an incredible dad. That stoic, cerebral, structured, almost like robotic guy became such a softie. And Dan said it so eloquently how much he loved his kids. And really every social gathering we ever went to, everything that we ever did, basically had the same cadence. It was talk of family, how much he just absolutely loved his kids, and then an extra dessert and dinner for the missus when he was going home. What was truly amazing, and I think really the magnanimity of Dave, is that he applied his brilliance in a way, he could have applied his brilliance in a way that would have made him exceptionally wealthy. But that was really meaningless to him. He wanted nothing at all to distract from his time with his family and his kids. He did well enough to always be present for them, and sometimes for us when they were busy. He was quite content with life, and that contentment grew every time we met him because of something that Xander and Penny would do. I'll kind of leave with two quotes that I thought were really fitting. Thomas Campbell wrote, to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. There are people that come into our lives with ease. Dave entered our life and left an indelible mark in our hearts. Let's not cry because he's here. Let's smile because of all the beautiful memories and stories that we were able to experience because of him. And finally, a quote from the Baha'i writings, which Dave and I used to talk about often. Oh my God, thy trust has been returned to thee.
Dave, you still love my singing, so I'm gonna use the keyboard right now. I'm not gonna sing a song. What I like to do is just give some moments from Dave that reflect my time with him. One time, Dave and two friends of ours drove all the way to Meeker, Colorado, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, to meet one of our friends' mothers and spend time with them. And there was a gathering that evening. There was a dinner prepared, and it was a bunch of former hippies living in the mountains. And the agreement was we're going to sing some songs, just a couple songs, maybe one or two, and then have a nice dinner afterwards. And we were all very, very hungry. And unfortunately, the one or two songs turned into 20, 25 songs. We're talking like old school, just things that we had never heard before. And it went on and on and on. And then one person said, well, I'm going to say just a short prayer. So they read a short prayer. And I looked at Dave, and he was grabbing a book. And I was like, I don't know what he's doing. So then it seemed like it was time for dinner. And then Dave put his head down and said, oh God, my God. And he proceeded to recite a 45-minute prayer to teach them a lesson for making the songs go on too long. It was really funny. There's a lot of stories about Dave. I was able to dare Dave to do things. most of them involve food. One time we were at Perkins. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're eating pancakes, and it's just full of people after parties and stuff. And Dave had a stack of about, I think, 6 pancakes. And I said, Dave, there's no way you can get all 6 of those pancakes in your mouth at the same time. And he took the challenge and somehow got 6 pancakes in his mouth. Our table was laughing so loud, we got kicked out of Perkins. That happened quite often with us. When I met Dave, him and I were both, younger. We were in our early 20s, and we were both kind of seeking the truth. We were seeking our place in the world, and that's probably my most core memory of Dave, is someone that was always wanting to seek the truth. And I think that's a beautiful thing for all of us. I don't want to talk for too long. I want to give time for Jorma, but I just want to talk to the family, to Richard and Lucy. You guys are incredible parents. You are incredible parents. You have raised 2 amazing sons. Lucy, the love that's in your heart, your love for God and your sincerity is such a beautiful thing. And Richard, your intellect and your sacrifice with the traveling you did for your family is incredible. Dan, your brother talked about you all the time.
Thank you.
He loved you so much. It's been great to get to know you a little bit. I will tell you, to see Chinyere and Jenny interact as a unit with the children is awesome to behold that. It says something about Dave that this family unit is still intact for the kids. That's incredible. Chinyere, I'll tell you that in the time I spent with Dave over the last months, he talked about you constantly and how you were his purpose. And that's beautiful. And for Penny and Xander, I'm sure you guys are full of a lot of just thoughts and things in your heart. And I just want you to know your father was a giant. Your father was a giant. And we loved him very much.
I'm gonna bring the whole box. I was fine until the song. I quit. All right, so I met Dave about 30 years ago, and of all places, through a mutual friend of ours, Russ, and met in a frat house. And the last place that I would ever be, it was be in a frat house. And that's the last place you would think that after you got to know Dave, that you would find him in a frat house. And Russ is like, no, don't worry about it. Because Russ is not really supposed to be in a frat house either. He was actually just paying money to have a place to rent in college. So I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, I'll meet him. He's a frat guy, whatever. And I walked into his room, and I kid you not, it was wall-to-wall books. And I immediately nerded out. I'm like, I could get to know this guy. And we'd have lots of conversations about books, about stories like the Game of Thrones, before the Game of Thrones was the Game of Thrones, and the Wheel of Time, before that was the Wheel of Time. We were like, and now we've been validated, like 30 years later, we were the coolest kids on the block. Back then, we didn't think so, obviously. But then there was a side of Dave that, and I wanted to share this today, and he wanted me to share it. And somebody else touched on it, about the philosophical side of Dave, the transcendent side of Dave, the metaphysical side of Dave, where he would talk endlessly about religion, about the soul, and what is our purpose. And you know, I was raised as a member of the Baha'i faith, but it really wasn't something that I really knew that much about in depth. You know, it was yes, it was part of my life, it was part of my family, it was part of what I would, and the Baha'i faith, that's something that really drew Dave to it, was this concept, or this ideology of the three onennesses. The oneness of God, that regardless of what the name might be, if it's Allah, if it's God, or if it's, you know, Yahweh, or whoever it might be, it's all God. It's all the same source. And then the oneness of religion, which was where all religion comes from the same source, so all religion is one. But the thing that really, really got Dave, and you can see this, and you can see the diversity that's here in this crowd, in his family, the way he lived his life, his friends, is the oneness of humanity, that we're all one. And that meant more to him than anything. And then we bonded on that. We grew on that. We loved each other for that. And how that was just, it was just a part of our lives. And he really wanted me to say that. And he wanted to say that, you know, what I wanted to say was, when I spent those last few days with him, it seemed like the wall between the next world and this world was so thin. And, you know, as Baha'is, we believe that the next world is there, but we just we can't see it, we don't quite understand it. It's similar to a child in the womb of the mother. And there was a conversation of maybe like two twins in the womb, and they would have this conversation, well, you know, I don't believe in God, you know, and the other twin would say, well, what about mother? And it's just like, there's that relationship that the children have, and then they enter this world, and it's like, whoa. So we felt like Dave's in the next world, and he's close, and he's holding on to us. And there's little coincidences that, as Jenny had brought up, that I've been having myself, that it's just been remarkable. And one of the things that I wanted to share, that the day that Dave passed, I saw this quote, and it's about prayer, and it's about the conversation that we would have that hit me pretty hard. Those who have ascended have different attributes from those who are on earth, yet there's no real separation. In prayer, there's a mingling of station, a mingling of condition. Pray for them as they pray for you. And that blew my mind. Dave is in the next world, and he's saying prayers for me, he's saying prayers for you, he's saying prayers for his family. And so I wanted to end with a prayer, because that's what he had asked me to do. And I wanted to honor that. If I can find it. Okay. That's a prayer for the departed. O my God, verily thy servant humbled before the majesty of thy divine supremacy, lowly at the door of thy oneness, hath believed in thee and in thy verses, hath testified to thy word, hath been enkindled with the fire of thy love, hath been immersed in the depths of the ocean of thy knowledge, hath been attracted to thy breezes, hath relied upon his supplication to thee, and hath been assured of thy pardon and forgiveness. He hath abandoned this mortal life, and hath flown to the kingdom of immortality, yearning for the favor of meeting thee. O Lord, glorify his station, shelter him under the pavilion of thy supreme mercy. Cause him to enter thy glorious paradise, and perpetuate his existence in thine exalted rose garden, that he may plunge into the sea of light in the world of mysteries. Verily thou art the generous, the powerful, the forgiver, and the bestower. We're going to miss our brother. We love him very much. And he wanted to convey his love for all of you. So thank you.
pastor, and David enjoyed sharing with me from his Baha'i faith. And the send-off that I wrote are his words that he shared with me from the send-off. And so, but before we read the send-off, I am asked if there is anyone out there who is gathered today who wants to tell us part of your journey in David's journey. And you are invited to share.
My name's Nick, and I met David twice. The first time I met David was at Dan's wedding. We became really good friends. And then back in November, Dan put the thing on Facebook, and I called David, and he remembered me because if you know me, I don't know boundaries, and I cuss very badly. So, and he goes, "Of course I remember you. Who can forget you?" And we talked and said blah 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 whatever. And I called Dan. I said, "Hey, talk to your brother." And I said, "What's your brother's walk with God?" He goes, "You know, he's I would say either agnostic or atheist. I'm not sure." And I said, "Okay, I'll call you back." So I called David, and we talked for an hour and a half. I told him story after story after story, and told him about who God is and coincidences. And I told him about one of my coincidences when I'm like David, I'm heady. I'm an engineer, a degree in electrical engineering, and you know, facts are the thing. So I met a guy named Ken Ham, Answers in Genesis, and he had this big, huge seminar about how creation versus evolution, and creation's the deal and evolution's a lie. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I was told all this, so I was like, whatever. So I went, and I'm at school, and I'm in college, and if you guys know anything about college students, we all have tons of money. Not. So we had candy bars for 55 cents, and I needed my Snickers. I had 30 cents. I'm going through my entire car looking for 25 cents. I cannot find 25 cents. I'm going through the whole thing. I lift up my mattress, or not mattress, what do you call it, the mat, whatever, the thing, floor mat. And I get in the car, and I'm like, all right, God, here's my bargain. You're telling me that creation's the real deal and not evolution. I will believe in childlike faith that creation is real, but I need a quarter. So whatever. So I'll get out of the car, I lock it. I say, hold on, let me check one more time. I lift up that car floor mat, and I'm telling you, it was the size of a saucer, a quarter. And I go, oh my gosh, what a coincidence. No. I sat there, wait a minute. I'm just going to mock God after I prayed for a quarter, and he gave me a quarter, and I said, okay, God, I truly believe. So yeah, I sold my soul for a quarter. And when I told Dave that story, he goes, oh my God, I had the same story. I go, what happened? He goes, I forgot where he said he was driving, and he said it was nighttime, and he was running out of gas, and he was in the middle of nowhere. And he says, literally, if I didn't get home, I was going to die, because apparently it's cold up here. So he told me that he went through his entire car looking, and then he sat in the chair in his driver's seat, and he says, Jesus, I need $3 to get home. Please help. And he turned in his back seat after looking through his car 3-4 times, and wedged between the back seat and the seat was the wallet he lost 3 years ago. He says he opened up the wallet, and guess what was in it? Wrong! That's what I said, 20. See, God gives you more than you ask for, and that's what's awesome. He said, Nick, I looked at that and I said it was a coincidence. And I filled up my car and went home. And I told him, David, coincidence is a secular definition for God's intervention. Jesus has been sending you love notes your entire life, and you've been throwing them in the trash. And I said, let's pray. And I asked him, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And he says, I do. And we cried, and I said, did you say it for me to make me feel good, or did you really mean it? He goes, I really meant it. And I said, look, God says, seek me and you shall find me. You can seek him with your heart, seek him with your head, but God is not going to hide from you if you seek for him. And the next day I get a call from Dan saying, my brother's not doing good. I think he's going to take a morphine drip. Well, it didn't happen. And I called David. I said, hey, what happened? He goes, I had the worst nightmare in the world. I was told I was worthless, didn't deserve to live anymore, and that I should die. I said, that was an enemy. That was Satan attacking you, telling you that you're worthless because, you finally came home. So I promised him I'll bring him some ribs, because I live now in Texas, originally from Cleveland, learned how to barbecue. I make awesome ribs, allegedly. So I said, all right, I'll see you in 2 weeks. So Tuesday, that was the day he went to the zoo. I called him, he never called back. I was setting it up on Sunday. He never returned my calls. And, later on, David calls Dan and says, screw Nick, he never showed up. And Dan called me, screw you, he never showed up. I said, I called him, he never called me back. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll wait after Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving goes by. I called him after Thanksgiving, he says, come by Tuesday. So I come by, I'm at the airport, I got the ribs, I'm waiting to get on the plane at 10 o'clock, and the pilot quits. And I have to wait 4-hour delay. So I'm sitting there making friends, talking to Hans from Germany, who happens to be a Christian, like there's 3 left there. He's one of them, so he sits there. And I finally text David and says, hey, I'm on my way. And Chinyere says, no, don't come, David's not doing well. And I go, oh. And Hans looks at me and he says, go anyway. So I'm not going to disrespect his wife. He goes, did David say not to go? I said, no. He said, he was calling him now. So, okay. So I call and David picks up. Hey, Dave. He goes, hey. I says, your wife says you're not doing well. He goes, no, I'm not doing good. I said, 3 things. I'm at the airport. I got ribs and I'll pray for you. He goes, yeah, come pray for me. I finally get there, I see him, he's not doing well. We serve him some ribs, he doesn't eat any ribs. He finally goes to sleep. I look at his wife, I says, I think I'm gonna go. She's like, yeah, me too. And he screams, no! Puts up both of his hands and says, pray for me. Prayed for him, and Chinyere says he had the biggest smile on his face. So, I'm here to tell you guys, as much as we know how much David rejected everything that he would say, didn't believe, Mom, I'm telling you, you're going to see your boy again. He's going to be in his glorious body, and when you see him, you're going to remember him, and you guys are going to have an amazing time. And so all of you, God, if you don't know who God is, seek him. He will reveal himself to you. I mean, I'm a nobody. I've only met him twice. And, share your stories, and you will be with him again, and it'll be a glorious reunion, and eternity is awesome. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
As a spiritual care chaplain and pastor, I'm given the privilege to stand on sacred ground. Every time I stepped into David's room, I knew that I was in a sacred space filled with love and honor and integrity and questions. Dave pondered much, life, death, and the afterlife, and he shared from his friends of his Baha'i experience and faith. And Dave had this unique, beautiful ability to embrace those of us whose, he just welcomed people of faith into his space, irregardless of how we, certainly as a Lutheran pastor, I don't know much about the Baha'i faith, but he invited me to look into some of the passages and to share he invited me to listen to him as he shared his thoughts. And I was certainly given that great honor of visiting with him. Today I read the send-off that I put together based on David's thoughts and words. So basically David wrote this send-off together with me. David is at rest. His body is silent. Today you may cry. Maybe for a long time your tears will flow. But David hopes you will remember to laugh. If not soon, then someday. David also wants you to know that while he is no longer present with you, he hopes you know that he will be in the wind that blows through your hair. He will be in the rain that cleanses away the muck and the dirt that gathers. And he will be in the bright sky. He will be the bright sky that kisses your face with sunshine. He is at peace. He has lived well because he has loved well. His greatest joy was to love his family. He will ride the waves of the ocean, much like he soared with you, Xander and Penny, while you were at the zoo as you zoomed him up and down the paths. He laughs with the monkeys, and he will continue to find joy in the antics of their play. David asks that you honor him with your life and your celebration of his love. With beauty, with season, and with your ability to love, remember him and live well. Hold David's memory in your hearts, for he is worthy of being remembered and treasured and adored. In the rising of the sun, in the blowing of the wind, in the shrill sounds of a storm, in the opening of the buds of flowers, in the rebirth of spring, in the blue skies of autumn beauty, in the end of the year and in the beginning of a new year, when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost or sick at heart, when we have joys and when we yearn to share, as long as we live, we shall remember David and his invitation to us to live in joy. Amen. Chinyere, did you want me to read the poem? Or did you want to read it? So this is a poem that they shared together. It is by Mary Elizabeth Fry. It is called Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep. And together they decided they really wanted it read. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am in 1,000 winds that blow. I am the softly falling snow. I am the gentle showers of rain. I am the fields of ripening grain. I am in the morning hush. I am in the graceful rush of beautiful birds in circling flight. I am the starshine of the night. I am in the flowers that bloom. I am in a quiet room. I am in the birds that sing. I am in each lovely thing. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I do not die. The family wishes that you take time to greet one another, to take time to, the time that you need in this space, but also know that there is a private graveside service that is scheduled, and that schedule is scheduled by the cemetery, and that they will do their best to adhere to it, and that by about 1:30, the family and a few will be proceeding to the cemetery for a private graveside. So if you feel that, oh, the family is moving you on before you are ready, it is not their wish, it is not their desire that that happen, but that they are on a time frame set for them by someone else, the cemetery. And so at this time, we thank you for being here. Your support, your love means the world to them. Thank you. Go in peace, my friend. Go in peace. Amen.
This concludes the services. Go in peace.